Let's lock in. Has the influence of Turki Alalshikh improved the sport of boxing? This is a serious question because there is that assertion where people believe that Turki Alalshikh has been good for boxing. He's making the fights people want to see, and they automatically stamp it as Turki Alalshikh is great for boxing. He's making the big fights happen. They think it's a positive, but then you have people who say it's not. He's not good for boxing, and he's ruining the sport. Here, I'll give you my honest take starting now. Personally, I believe Turki Al-Sheikh wants to start a boxing league. And I think we're already in the midst of this boxing league. And if you watch the other channel, I've been stating this from the inception, from the beginning. I stated that Turki Al-Sheikh is trying to create his own boxing league. And he needs three pieces to make that happen. One, he needs Canelo Alvarez. Two, he needs Gervonta Davis. And three, he needs Naoya Inoue. But he has Inoue now because Inoue has agreed to work with him. But at that time, he didn't. And the reason why he needs them is because he's already had Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, and a lot of the big names fight under his banner. He just had Arthur Beterbiev, Dmitry Bivol fight for Undisputed. He had the heavyweight Undisputed. Canelo Alvarez was undisputed at 168 until he got stripped for not fighting Scully, right? But the point is, Canelo Alvarez is one of the faces of boxing. You know, I say one of the faces because I'm not going to debate people who want to argue between Tank and Canelo. For me personally, the more fighters we have that can generate revenue and sell pay-per-views, the better it is for the sport. Both fighters have proven at one time or another that they can do that. So they're both great for the sport of boxing, but they both haven't fought for Turki Al-Sheikh yet. And the reason why it's important for Turki Al-Sheikh to get Canelo to fight under his banner and to get Gervonta Tank Davis to fight under his banner is he needs to be able to sell to the public that the best fighters fight for Turki Al-Sheikh. And right now, Canelo fights for Al Haymon and PBC, and so does Gervonta Tank Davis. And so in order for him to really get that stranglehold on the sport of boxing that he covets and that he desires, he needs Canelo to fight on his card and possibly even lose to a fighter that's under his control. And the same with Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, Turkey is trying to create a boxing league, and this is evident when you see Riyadh Season. Riyadh Season, he brings these massive cards where people go to Saudi Arabia and they go to fight in Saudi Arabia. And he puts on these type of cards you would never see in the UK or in the United States because promoters typically throw their cash cows in there against another promoter's cash cow, and it has huge ramifications if their fighter takes a loss. Think of Eddie Hearn, for example, who's been getting schooled massively by Frank Warren, and so a lot of his stable has taken a significant hit, right? To the point where Eddie Hearn is really out here looking bad because everyone's like, yo, bro, you can't match your fighters properly to save your life. And you're getting spanked. Like, we get it. You want to match the best against the best. But if you keep matching the best against the best and your fighters keep losing, that's an indication that you're not signing the best and you don't have the best eye for talent and you're setting your fighters up to fail. So with this happening, you would never see it if it wasn't for Turki Al-Sheikh in Riyadh Season. So Riyadh Season has, of course, become its own type of league. So Turki Al-Sheikh's trying to create a boxing league. Riyadh Season is the boxing league, basically. And he puts on these massive cards. Now, is it good for boxing? I'm going to break some things down to you objectively for you to understand this, and then you tell me if I'm lying. Riyadh Season has had some of the best cards we've seen. Stacked, loaded, from opening bell to the final bell. Some great fights, right? Has any of those fights ever broken a pay-per-view record? Has any card that Turki Al-Sheikh held since he came into boxing broken a record? Another question is, since Turki Al-Sheikh has come into the sport of boxing, how much revenue has he generated? Now, if you talk about money he's put into the sport of boxing versus money he's accumulated, right? What do you think would be? Do you think he's made more money than he spent on the sport of boxing? Because this matters in the future of whether or not it's sustainable. See, my issue isn't about, what Turki Alalshikh is doing right now. Do I love the card coming on February 22nd? I think it's one of the greatest cards of all time. Do I love the card coming next week, December 21st? You bet your bottom dollar I do. I love the fact I got to see Tyson Fury versus Usyk for Undisputed, and I love the fact that I'm seeing an immediate rematch. I'm grateful for that. But again, if there keeps being more loss than gain, is it sustainable? And at what point does that change? So I'm here to tell you, I'm not saying that it's not good or bad for boxing. I'm just saying that needs to change in order for this to continue. Because if it doesn't continue, well, then it may not be the best thing for the sport of boxing, because you keep putting out these loaded stack cards and you're still not breaking pay-per-view records. People still aren't buying at a record pace. And I know you could blame that on these illegal sites. You could blame it on a lot of things, but the fact still remains, illegal sites were around when Gervonta Tank Davis put up 1.2 million against Ryan Garcia. Which brings me to my next point. Turki Alalshikh has the resources to put on these fights, but the storylines aren't really resonating the way they should, and the fights aren't being built the way that they should be. And for me, I think there needs to be some WWE aspect. Like, you want to create your league, you have to sell the storylines the same way the WWE sells the storylines. So it should be like the road to Saudi Arabia, right? Where you put on fights in the United States and in the UK. You don't just put on all the fights in Saudi Arabia, but you put on some good cards in the United States. You put on some good cards in the UK, Australia, places where boxing is big, right? So that way people get invested into it. So by the time you bring the massive fight to Saudi Arabia for Riyadh season and you stack that card, the storyline's there. People are invested, because right now it's like people are grateful that they're seeing the fights, but they're not as invested in the fights because, again, there is that building the fight and building the interest in the fight organically that's not taking place, because people aren't being able to go to certain fights, to see certain fights, to see the fighter get built up. And that's why I think the storylines need to come in. The next crop, who's going to take over when Tyson Fury's gone? Who's going to take over when Usyk's gone? Who's going to take over when Anthony Joshua's gone? They're not here for too long. What do you give them? 5 years? 6 years max? We need to be building up the profile of these fighters for the next few years. And that's why I disagree with Eddie when he's like, oh, we don't do whatever. No, you don't just throw guys in too early. When Mike Tyson was fighting for championships in 1988 and Undisputed in 1988, Lennox Lewis was fighting in amateurs. Was Lennox Lewis not a pro talent? Yes, but it was understood that he needed to perfect his skills more. There were things he needed to learn. That you don't just randomly throw guys in and say the best, swim or drown. No, you need a prospect with that. And then once they're ready, that's when you test them. And this narrative that, oh, you just throw them in, that's not the way it was. When Lennox got knocked out with Oliver McCall, he didn't go into a immediate rematch. When, and then the immediate rematch with Sean Rockman happened when he was already champion, he was already polished. And this is the thing, like, you got to build fighters. You got to teach fighters. You got to give fighters a chance to perfect their craft, perfect their skills. You want them to be in a tough fight, but you don't want them to lose. You don't want them to lose confidence. You don't want to damage them. And I feel like that build-up stage with Turki Alalshikh may potentially, I think that storyline aspect, building up the prospects, putting them out in front of their local crowd so that they can gain that connection and make people want to spend money with them. I think that's starting to lack. And I think that's showing in the fact that the sales aren't doing as well. Because, for example, I think there's some fights that were on those undercards in Saudi Arabia that if they took place in the backyard of the fighters or, somewhere where locals could go and see the fights, it would have done better. So personally, I'm not saying Turki Alalshikh isn't good for boxing, but what I'm saying is there's still a lot to be desired, and there's still a lot that needs to be done to make this something that is sustainable moving forward. So I like what Turki Alalshikh is doing, but again, I do realize that he's just throwing away a lot of money. Even buying Ring Magazine, buying Michael Benson's Twitter account, buying talent, certain people, getting them on board to say certain things. Yeah, all that's cool, but the overall product, the only way to prove it's a success is if you're moving units. That's the ultimate way that you're gonna determine that your fight is successful. It's not enough to be like, yeah, we're the most illegally streamed. Nah. And he's making some strides. Like, he lowered the price for pay-per-views, which I think is smart. Because if I had the option to watch a fight, that's fuzzy and messed up for free, I'll pay $20 to watch it high quality, 4K on my TV. I pay to watch it 4K, right? So there's a lot out there, but overall, if I had to say, has Turki Alalshikh's influence improved boxing? I would say a moderate yes. I'm not. Um, I'm not praising him as highly, and I'm not ready to be like he's the savior of boxing as much as other people are, because I do see he's making fights that I want to see. Yes, he's making these massive cards, but it's not resulting in record-breaking pay-per-view numbers. It's not even breaking top 10 pay-per-view sales of all time, right? And I think that that has a lot to do with the promotion, how it's being promoted, but also the fact that some people are upset because they feel like the fights they want to see are being taken away from them and brought to Saudi Arabia. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not blaming Turki Alalshikh for that, because the way I see it is, if you put up the money, you get to pick the venue, you get to pick the fight order, you get to do whatever you want. If you put up the money, you're the one paying for it. But I think the smart way to do it is kind of like, if you're going to create a league, which is what I know Turki Alalshikh is trying to do, even when he comes out with that undisputed belt that he created, right? And they're taking pictures with it. Arthur Beterbiev takes a picture with it. Usyk takes a picture with it. Like, he's trying to normalize the undisputed champion holding that belt, right? I think what you need to do is you need to create some structure and you need to create some storylines, like the road to Saudi Arabia. That way, it's a privilege for these fighters to make it to Saudi Arabia to fight during Riyadh season. And until then, they're fighting on these cards in the United States, in the UK, trying to build their following, their fan base. I think I heard that Turki Alalshikh is trying to put on Martin Bakoli versus F.A. Ajapa in Africa. That's dope. If you can pull that off, that's dope. But again, don't sleep on the storylines and building a fan base and getting the locals to care about a fighter and getting on the back of fighter. Because, if all else fails, you should be able to sell out, like, where you live, your hometown, your state. You should be able to do that. But yeah, has his influence improved the sport of boxing? I don't want to say it hasn't, because there's an excitement around the sport that hasn't been there in a while, because we're getting to see the best fight the best. We're getting a lot of shockers. We're seeing a lot of people show that with opportunity, they can prove themselves, and it's been good for the sport of boxing. But until it translates into revenue, then to me it's unsustainable. And when it becomes unsustainable, what's going to happen if Turki Alalshikh, the man who just bought Ring, the man who just bought Michael Benson's, the man who's in partnership with all these stables, if he decides, you know what, I'm done losing money, I'm not putting on these massive cards no more. If he decides I'm finished, bad investment, where does that leave the sport? You see, then the sport's in a worse position than it was when he came in. And then there's also the fear that he could freeze out certain fighters. You saw the way he reacted to Tim Tszyu, and he kind of got some backlash for that, and then he kind of backed off a little bit. I'm not saying Turki Alalshikh's a bad guy. I don't know him. I do think that his intent is pure, but there's only so much money you can lose before you say, forget that. And that's where I'm at right now. This has to start turning into revenue and generating revenue, and, or else the reward isn't worth the risk, the financial risk, at which case I'm just worried that Turki Alalshikh is going to be like, you know what, this experiment isn't working. Let's just terminate this boxing operation. And then if he decides to do that, it's going to leave boxing in a worse place than it was when he got into it. And I think that's everyone's main fear. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe. It's Caden. I'm out. Peace.